The tone of my lead guitar doesn't really sound like I want it to. You see, I recorded the guitar directly into my audio interface because I couldn't make a lot of noise. I didn't want to disturb my neighbors by turning up my amp really loud. So how do we make this sound like the guitar was recorded through an amplifier? Well, there's a plugin for that. Actually, we're going to use a couple of plugins to create the guitar tone. We're going to use an amp and cabinet simulator, as well as a reverb. And part of what makes an electric guitar sound the way it does is the amplifier, so it's pretty important. When we record an electric guitar directly, it sounds like this. I'm going to just solo the lead guitar track and play it for you. Now, to me, that sounds very flat and lifeless. So the first thing I'm going to do is insert an amp and cabinet simulator on the electric guitar track. So let's just click on the effects button here. We're actually going to filter, not by verb, but I'm going to type in the word amp. And there we go. I'm actually looking for this one right here, Convolution Amp Cab Modeler. Click OK. Okay, there are really only two parameters we need to look at here. The model and this preamp slider. This drop-down menu is a selection of amps and cabinets. And this preamp volume is what we're going to need to adjust in case we clip. Now, with this plugin, the meter on the left shows the input, and the meter on the right is showing the output. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this meter on the right to make sure that there's no clipping. Let's just hear what it sounds like right now in its default state. That already sounds better. Let me turn it off. Yeah. But there's one I like. I like this Fender Bassman. I have a soft spot for this sound. So let's hear this one. Okay, now I am clipping. So I'm going to bring this preamp level down. I'm going to bring it down pretty far just to make sure that I don't clip. This is telling me that I went 4.4 dB over, which means that I really probably only need to bring this down by -5, but I'm not sure about how loud the rest of it is. So what we can do to clear this is just click on it. I'm also going to clear this on the channel and over here on the master. Let's hear this again. Hear it off. Now I'll turn it on. I like that. Okay, the next thing I want to do is put this amp in a room. And I'm going to add reverb to do that. And I'm going to use the same reverb we did before. So all I need to do is click add. And this time I'll type verb down here. And this will bring up the different reverb plugins that are available. So reverb, let's double click that. And from our presets, I'm going to use the Audio Hacker Mellow Hall, but I'll use the insert one, as this is on an insert, not on a send. We're only affecting one track. Let's hear that. That's good. If I want to bring up the level of the reverb, I can bring up this fader right here. This is wet. And then the dry, if I pull this all the way down, all we hear is the reverb. So I'm going to double click that, and that's going to put that back to 0. So I'm pretty happy with that relative balance. Now, one other question that kind of comes up here is I've got two plugins on this track. So does it really matter what order I have these in? Well, it does, because the way that Reaper processes this audio is from top to bottom. So it's going to go through our Convolution Amp Cab Modeler and then into the reverb, which gives the impression of we have an amplifier then being affected by the space. So if I switch these around, which all I need to do is click and drag it up, and now my reverb comes before the amp. So let's hear that. Now the difference there is that the reverb is now going through the amp modeler, which is kind of like having a reverb in your amp coming out through the speaker, as opposed to having your amp in a big room. I prefer the sound of having the reverb after. We'll hear this one more time. Now I'll switch the order, just dragging and dropping. Yeah, for me, I prefer that second one. I think it's a little bit nicer sounding. Now, even though I prefer it that way, there's no real right or wrong answer to this. But you do need to be aware that there is a difference between having your reverb before or after. And this can go with other plugins too. So it's worth trying changing the order to see if you prefer one sound over the other. So I think the guitar is sounding pretty good now. I'm going to close this window and going to unsolo it, and let's hear it in the context of the song. That's much better. If I turn these effects off, which I can do right here on the track panel, there's this little power button next to the effects. When I click that, you'll notice it goes red, just telling us the effects are disabled. Let's hear that. Can barely hear it. So let's hear it soloed. So that's what we started with, and this is what we ended up with. And that's one way to create a realistic guitar tone without using an amplifier.